Welcome. This is our 11th session of the 2025 version of our twice monthly series of virtual Wednesday roundtables. With these, we hope to bring you the latest information on both clinical and non-clinical issues important to the equine veterinarian. This roundtable is entitled Eye on the Fly, New World Screwworm Update. Our experts on this subject are Drs. Sally Donato, Neil Gray, Andrew Short, and Cody Egnor. Once we get started, I'll let them introduce themselves further. But first, again, that bit of housekeeping. Please take advantage of the interactive nature of these roundtables and chime in with your questions and comments using the Q&A box for your questions and the chat box for your comments. We will try to get to as many of your questions as possible. And again, it works best if you use the Q&A box for your questions that you hope to see an answer for. We will keep an eye on chat as well. And don't forget to use that reaction button. Quick reminder that these sessions don't convey race-accredited CE, and a quick shout out to Kevin Hinchman, our IT man behind the curtain. And before we get started, we want to shout out our sponsor for this session, American Regent Animal Health, and Dr. Howland Mansfield, representative of American Regent, is here to talk to us just a bit and kick off our session. So, Dr. Mansfield, I'm passing things over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Howland Mansfield, and I am the Senior Manager of Professional Services Veterinarian at American Regent Animal Health, makers of Equine IM and BetaVet. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for attending tonight. Your passion for animals and dedication to their care is important and meaningful work. American Regent Animal Health is proud to be an educational partner of the American Association of Equine Practitioners for over 15 years, supporting educational opportunities that benefit the association, its members, and most importantly, the horses. We are excited to sponsor this evening's virtual roundtable session, Eye on the Fly, New World Screwworm Update, with Drs. Sally Donato, Andrew Short, Neil Gray, and Cody Egnor. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. And if you'd like more information on American Regent Animal Health or our products, you can visit aranimalhealth.com. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Donato and this esteemed panel of doctors for tonight's roundtable.
Thank you, Dr. Mansfield. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody who's tuning in this evening. I'm Sally Donato. I'm part of the AAEP and I chair the Infectious Disease Committee. And in addition to our online resources such as disease guidelines, the IDC responds to encroaching risks. And I think that this one certainly qualifies. So as the New World Screwworm gets closer to the US border, the IDC thought it was important to deliver a program specific to the equine sector. And unique to this roundtable, as opposed to our normal Wednesday roundtables, which are open only to AAEP veterinarians, we've actually opened this up to horse owners as well. So feel free to share this with your clients if it's of use, and will help them perhaps identify, hopefully, when this gets here to the US, we're going to want to have everybody with all eyes on deck to identify any cases. So we've put together a panel tonight. Thank you for being here. We have kind of a wide or a diverse set of backgrounds. We have Dr. Andrew Short, who's an entomologist from the University of Florida, Dr. Cody Egnor, who is a USDA veterinarian, who's going to talk to us about the regulatory aspects of this disease. And then we also are very happy to host Dr. Neil Gray, who has actually seen New World Screwworm in real life during his work with the AAEP Equitarian Initiative, and is actually going to be able to present a few cases. And so my hope is that tonight will provide, at the very least, some valuable information, and at the very most, a healthy dose of heebie-jeebies to everybody. And I knew I wouldn't get through this without saying that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Short, who's going to kick off by just kind of reviewing the life cycle and biology of this parasite.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Donata. I'm going to start screen sharing. Um, cool. So my name is Andrew Short. I am the chair of the Department of Entomology and Nematology here at the University of Florida. I think I'm the only non-vet on this panel, so you're only going to get advice about insects from me and not about treating your animals. But I just wanted to give a little bit of background about the biology, about what screwworm is, and a little bit of its history. I'm also in charge of coordinating the University of Florida response for screwworm here in the state of Florida. So a little bit about what is New World Screwworm. So New World Screwworm is a non-biting fly. So the adults of New World Screwworm, the adult flies do not bite animals. It is the larvae that are parasitic of living tissue of warm-blooded animals. So unlike many flies that lay eggs on dead tissue or dead carcasses or carrion, this fly is the opposite, where the larvae and the maggots feed exclusively on living tissue of warm-blooded animals. So you might have heard this fly called by a couple of other names. Sometimes you'll hear it called primary screwworm. That is because there's another common fly that is not parasitic on live animals called secondary screwworm, so that's a different species entirely, not to be worried about. And the scientific name, Hopliomyia hominivores, which is the scientific species name for this fly. There also sometimes you might hear about an old world screwworm, which again is a different species, and that does not occur in North America or South America. Central America is entirely in the old world. And so again, not to be confused with that species either. So a little bit more about screwworm. So the adults lay eggs, which I'm sure you're familiar with its life cycle of many common insects that turn into maggots, which are the ones that actually feed on living tissue and then pupate in the soil. One of the reasons that this is called it's got its name for being called a screwworm is kind of its little like morphological resemblance in terms of like it feeds head down into the flesh of animals. So the bottom of that maggot picture, you can see two little mouth hooks, or what it's using to feed. And it kind of has these circular rings of these little spines that help grip itself inside of the flesh. And so this little appearance, it kind of gives it its name, screwworm. The adults are a little bit larger than a housefly, so 3 to 5 times about the size of a housefly. They live for between 7 and 10 days as adults. The eggs are very, 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 very small, so a fraction of the size of a grain of rice. There can be hundreds of eggs laid at one time. So when this fly is laying eggs, it can lay up between 100 and 350 eggs in one go. And a single fly can lay multiple batches of eggs. So a single female could lay 7, 8, 9 times that number of eggs. These eggs hatch within about 24 hours. They are laid and hatch inside usually in some kind of wound or break in the skin. So it does not have to be a large wound. It can be something as small as a tick bite. They can also lay their eggs on mucous membranes or other areas of very, very kind of easy to penetrate tissue, although that is maybe less common. But any kind of wound or scratch on the animal where there's an area of open skin could be susceptible for screwworm infection. These larvae then burrow into the flesh. They grow up to be about 2/3 of an inch long. That life cycle inside the animal is completed within 1 week. Then they will leave the animal, and when the larvae burrow out of the animal, then they'll go under the ground, burrow into the soil, and pupate and emerge within 7 to 10 days. So this whole life cycle can be completed in ideal conditions in around 18 days. And I should say this is very seasonal and weather dependent. So this would be under very ideal warm conditions. Sometimes this life cycle can take up to several months under very cold, kind of cold weather conditions. So it is dependent upon the temperature on how fast this life cycle is going to go. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about identification here, but I just want to stress right now that you should not be yourself trying to identify screwworms. If you suspect you have screwworm, contact your vet immediately, get the samples looked at. Don't try to look at the CD between the eyes and see if the stripes match, right? So again, these flies are 3 to 5 times the size of a housefly. They are usually metallic blue or green. And again, I just want to clarify, there's almost 100 other species of shiny green fly that look very similar to this. So again, even if you think something looks like this fly, it has kind of 3 stripes in the thorax. where it has like these characteristic like red eyes like you're seeing in this picture, which the New World Screwworm has. There are other flies that look just like that. And unless you are trained and have a microscope to identify these flies, you cannot make you cannot make an authoritative identification. So I strongly encourage people to reach out to their state or veterinarian before they think they have screwworm. A few just key facts here on the biology. So again, wounds don't have to be very large for a screwworm to identify it as kind of a place to lay eggs. It can be as small as a tick bite. These infestations, when you have initial screwworm infection and you can have a larvae kind of laying its eggs and starting kind of that several hundred maggots growing, that can attract and then in turn other females to lay eggs in that same wound or near that same opening. And so it's not just a matter of having one cycle of those few hundred eggs for that female, but that will attract more and more females to lay more and more eggs in some cases, and that can make the wound and condition of the animal even worse. So I just want to clarify, these larvae are feeding on live tissue only. If an animal dies, those early instar larvae, those larvae that might have just be a couple of days old, are also going to die. However, if the larvae are almost ready to pupate, so if you have a large animal and the larvae are already 5, 6, 7 days old and the animal dies, those larvae can still emerge and pupate. And so this is why it's really important if you do suspect screwworm, even on a deceased animal, that it not be moved, because there still could be larvae in that animal that are viable. One of the things that really makes this really an unfortunate situation, these larvae can burrow deeper and deeper into the animal. And so what you can get is that these larvae can actually burrow into the body cavity or the organs of an animal in kind of severe cases. And that is what actually causes the mortality or morbidity of an animal. And so it's not just like a bot fly or something that's going to stay on the surface and kind of not really do any kind of significant damage. These things really are a major problem that have to be addressed. Mortality on a large animal can occur in 7 to 14 days if something is untreated, like in a large animal. But if it has repeated infections of more and more screwworm, it can be a shorter period of time. I want to talk now briefly about the history of New World Screwworm. Some of the slides I have in here are Florida centric, but I'm going to kind of try to broaden that out a little bit. So screwworm is actually originally native to tropical Americas, including Texas. So it's not something that would be an invasive, it's not an introduced species in North America. But in terms of us here in Florida in the Southeast, it was not originally native here. It was introduced in 1933 through animal movement into Florida. It also, as I mentioned, is very temperature sensitive. So this is a map from where screwworm was occurring seasonally in the early 50s. And I've colored in the red areas. The red areas are where screwworm occurred and can live year round. It's warm enough in these spots that it had basically overwintering populations of screwworm. And then what would happen is during the warmer times of year, during the warmer months, those populations would migrate further north. And then as the temperatures cool down again, those populations would die back. The other thing to consider here, especially that big kind of blow up in the middle of the Midwest, this is where you have a lot of animal movement, cattle movement that is also then if you have infected cattle and they're moving across moving from Texas into feedlots or other areas, those are also can further the spread of screwworm. So this is just to say that the most areas that are most significantly at risk for screwworm are really in the southern United States, and then more northern United States you have at risk from either seasonal spread or animal migration or animal movement from infected areas. This is just an example from Southeast, from Florida. This was from a 1944 screwworm survey. Basically, the peninsula part of Florida, year-round screwworm, and in the summer months, the screwworm populations would migrate further into the southeast in Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, and then they would retreat again in the winter months. So again, just to show you, this is not a screwworm everywhere all the time situation. There was a distinct seasonality to where screwworm was endemic. Because we had to fight screwworm a lot before, we have a lot of anecdotes about how things were. Obviously, this was There's a lot of literature about this is from a document from Florida in 1957 talking about screwworm. I just wanted to highlight here that in Florida in that year that 75 to 85% of all livestock wounds were infested with screwworm. This was a very serious problem. It wasn't a matter of just there were a few animals infected, but at the peak of screwworm infection, you could see most wounds would be infected. And so this was a pretty significant issue to deal with. So how did we get rid of it the first time? So we used something called sterile insect technique. And so basically what happened, the way sterile insect technique works is you mass rear flies. In the screwworm situation, we're talking about tens to hundreds of millions of flies per week being reared. Those flies are sterilized with radiation. So it basically makes the males and females sterile without killing them. Those sterile flies are mass released, again, millions and millions per week into the wild screwworm range. Those sterile males mate with the wild females because the screwworm only mates one time. If a female mates with a sterile male, then basically there's no more reproduction, the life cycle ends, and eventually in a few generations, the populations die out. And so they basically mass produced flies and started eradicating screwworm from the United States. They started with the Southeast. That was eradicated in 1960. It was gone from the Southeast. By Texas and the rest of the Southwest, it was gone by 1966. Part of the problem here was, though, that remember that seasonality that I showed you is that the populations that were still in Mexico and Central America, seasonally those would flare back up into Texas and the Southwest. And so they decided to eradicate further down to the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in Mexico, and then later down to Panama, where there's a much narrower, first to push it away from the U.S. border so that it wasn't constantly threatening coming back into the United States. And also because of this way we're releasing flies, if it's over a much narrower area, then it's obviously much easier and cheaper and faster to maintain that barrier zone over a very narrow space. And so since 2001, the screwworm population has been basically blocked at the Panama-Colombia border. So there's actually this is a picture of the Copeg facility. This facility in Panama right now is producing 100 million, actually 107 million flies every week. And you can see there the original permanent buffer zone, basically between the canal and Colombia, Panama Canal and Colombia. All those flies were dumped in that area for the last 25 years to maintain this pest from coming back further north. So actually almost exactly 3 years ago, there was first indications that there was an outbreak starting in Panama of screwworm that had broken through this barrier. And about a year later, it was first reported in Costa Rica. Then in the end of 2024, it was first reported in Mexico. That triggered the first of a series of livestock shutdowns, livestock not moving across the southern border. And the third shutdown happened about a month ago, and that is still in effect as far as I know, that there's no livestock allowed across the Mexican border. There's a lot of speculation about the cause of this outbreak, and I'm not one here to tell you what is going on with it, but we are where we are with it right now. This is a map of the outbreak that was around the time of the first shutdown at the end of November. You can see that first point those 2 points there in southern Mexico. That's when we at first kind of, I think, broke through in the public consciousness that there might be an issue with this coming closer to the U.S. This is the current situation. This is the most recent map that USDA has made available from about 2 weeks ago. And you can see now it's basically widespread in southern Mexico. That point that's north of Mexico City is one of the most recent ones, and that's what triggered the most recent shutdown in the middle of July. And you can see as it spreads further north outside of that very narrow part of Mexico, that is kind of what has caused for significant concern. As it gets into the wider part of Mexico, that contact zone becomes much wider, and it's much harder to control with the fly capacity that we have available right now. So That is my very kind of just a very brief kind of synopsis, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Donata.
Thank you, Dr. Short. Fairly terrifying watching how it progressed right, right up the country. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I have just a little bit of general information about what these infections look like in animals and just a little bit on treatments that are currently available, but I won't take too much time because I want to pass it over to Dr. Gray, who has some actual cases for us to see. Okay, which screen are you guys looking at? Presenter mode?
We're looking at your correct slideshow.
Okay,
It looks
okay,
good.
great. Great. So, all right, we'll start with this slide. So what do these lesions look like? Well, they look like wounds full of maggots, which is pretty gross. So these can form in lacerations, or as Dr. Short mentioned, as areas as small as tick bites. Castration sites is a common one, and then the umbilici of foals. There was a talk yesterday in the USDA webinar about in some herds of ruminants, almost 100% of the umbilici in calf herds were affected in certain areas of the world by screwworms. So that's a really common portal of entry that has to be kind of monitored pretty carefully. These wounds are rapidly extensive. As Dr. Short mentioned, these maggots can burrow down into the flesh, so the wounds can be very deep. They can actually burrow sort of under the skin and make pretty deep paths. And the wounds are very painful because they're unlike our typical kind of roadside carcass maggots. These are eating live tissue, so it's actually quite painful to the animal. So things like restlessness, biting, weight loss, reduced appetite are all things that people should be on the lookout for in their animals. And then foul odor as the wounds become infected. If you'd like something to perhaps print out or to share within your clinics or within your practices, the AAEP recently teamed up with USDA and we co-branded this infographic. And you can find this, it's available to veterinarians and horse owners on the AAEP website as well as the EDCC website, both of which I have here. And this is just a nice informational sheet on what to look for and who to call should someone think that they perhaps have seen a case of screwworm. And then just a bit about preventing this specific to the equine patient. So certainly prompt wound care after injuries or surgeries is going to be really important. Vigilant monitoring of any new foal umbilici, using topical repellents or larvicides, and keeping open wounds covered. So not unlike here in the Southeast, where we are accustomed to trying to prevent habronomyosis by keeping wounds covered in some sort of a fly repellent or a larvicide, and then using pretty aggressive wound covering with bandaging. Yesterday, today and yesterday, actually, the USDA did some really great webinars for the animal industry and veterinarians regarding the current status of the New World Screwworm. And they had Dr. Tristan Colonius, who is the FDA Chief Veterinary Officer, talk about treatment specifically, because of course that's what everybody is most interested in, is if you see a case, how do we clear it up and what do we do? And so this is from Dr. Colonius's information, which was that there are currently no FDA-approved products to treat or prevent New World Screwworm, mostly because it's been eradicated from this country. So the FDA didn't really need to have any that were approved. There are off-label products that are effective, but people need to be aware that they are treating, using these medications off-label. With that said, the FDA, in response to this increasing risk of screwworm coming into the country, the FDA is facilitating access and accelerated access to animal drugs as part of the coordinated U.S. response. So we may have approved drugs in the near future, but we certainly have efficacious off-label medications. You can use this QR code here actually to access their website, which they said was going to be kept up to date. So it's a really nice way to get real-time information, since information is rapidly evolving regarding this situation. And this is just a screenshot from the website. There's also this website, which is the New World Screwworm information specifically for veterinarians, at this QR code. And you here there are information veterinarians may find useful in extra-label drug use decisions is the title of this table. And so it lists drugs that we know are effective and their route of administration, what species have been approved by the FDA, and then the specific literature if you want to dig deeper. With that said, in general, treatment involves manual removal of the larvae, which usually includes flushing or even debriding under local or general anesthesia. Even after you clear up one infection, it can become reinfected. So you want to continue to monitor for reinfestation. And then applying larvicidal compounds such as ivermectin, either systemically or topically. Permethrin sprays and porons are used commonly in horses. And then systemic therapy in addition to ivermectin, which is a larvicidal. You may also need to use broad-spectrum antimicrobials for secondary bacterial infections, and then NSAIDs and analgesics for pain and inflammation. This is an infographic that I borrowed from the USDA talk yesterday. Actually, I shamelessly screenshot it. What do I do if I suspect a screwworm in or on my animals? And so you want to contact the veterinarian. If you're a veterinarian, contact your state vet or your USDA office, and they'll help you work through a plan for treatment. Don't move the animal, keep it in a contained space, collect the maggots in rubbing alcohol, wear gloves. And the USDA or your state animal health official will help direct on where and how to submit those maggots for identification. That's all I have. am happy now to turn it over to Dr. Gray, who has actually seen equine cases of New World screwworm. So Dr. Gray, take it away. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Nada. I have trying to start my screen share here, so it seems to take a few seconds for that to take effect, and then once that goes, hopefully can you guys all see
Yes.
that now? Great. Okay. Thanks for including me in this webinar. I'm had a 35-year-long career as a sport horse practitioner in Southern California. Most of those horses didn't even get to see a parasite, let alone something like screwworm. So, I've been involved with the Equitarian Initiative, been on the board of directors for about 10 years. And I'm lucky enough to get to volunteer on multiple projects each year with EI. I've worked now in about 8 countries and on several Native American reservations here in the States. But I'm certainly no expert on New World screwworm, so I'm a little nervous about being on this panel. But unfortunately, I have been dealing with this current outbreak in Central America in some of the projects that I've been working on, as have several of my colleagues.
Dr. Gray, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt, but we're also seeing not only your screen share, but also the Zoom window.
I'm not sure.
There
Is
you
that,
That is
that area?
perfect. Yes,
Great.
thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm also not a very expert at Zoom either, so we'll do what we can here. So another name that this worm is known by in Latin America is Gusano berenador, and that term roughly translates to drilling worm, which I think is also a pretty apt name, as Dr. Short was mentioning, that this does eat live tissue. The first cases that I saw in Costa Rica were in January of 2024. But we've had cases on equitarian projects now in multiple countries, including Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and also been reported to us by some of the veterinarians that we work with in Nicaragua, although we don't have an active project in Nicaragua at the moment. The reporting requirements in these countries do vary from country to country. So we try to stay up on what those are as well. This is the first case that I saw, which was in January of 2024 in the south in Costa Rica, not very far from the Panamanian border. This was in a 10-year-old gelding, presented to us very lethargic, anorexic, poor body condition. The owner had noticed some blood on his prepuce, but was not familiar with the screwworm problem yet. As you can see in that video, they're pretty severe myiasis of the urethral fossa, which is actually, as it turns out, not an uncommon sight for this either. We sedated that animal, removed all the larvae, as has been discussed a little bit already, treated with topical insecticides, ivermectin orally, and fipronil topically. But you can see in that picture on the left how, just numerous larvae in that wound, and the wound just keeps getting larger as those larvae eat their way into the tissues. Again, collecting those larvae is important, not to let them drop onto the ground. And those were submitted to SENASA, which is basically the USDA equivalent in Costa Rica. This particular animal did have a packed cell volume of around 10, so really poor prognosis on this little horse. But the owner, we did discuss euthanasia since this horse was in such poor condition, but the owner did want to take him home and try to see if they could get this cleaned up. And unfortunately, we did not get any follow-up on that particular case. Also in January in 2024, on the Osa Peninsula, just across the bay from where that other horse was, on another project. This was not a project I was involved in, but so these are not my photos, but they were shared with me by the group there, Dr. Backer, and others. So that shows this horse that was presented, 14-year-old gelding. The weight loss that you can see in the photo of the horse, the owner had reported that the weight loss was pretty much noticed around the same time that they saw that the ear had a problem. That was cleaned and debrided and treated. All right, let me go back to that. Topically, the horse was given ivermectin orally as well, but they also applied a topical paste with ivermectin, silver sulfadiazine, and dexamethasone, and then began the horse on oral trimethoprim sulfa. And then this is a picture of the horse the day after that initial cleaning. The horse seemed to be doing really well with treatment, and this horse did get some follow-up. The owner did report that did go on to heal completely, and the horse did really well initially. But it was important to note that at this point, which is early in 2024, most of the people in these communities were not aware of screwworm problems yet, and very few had actually seen cases themselves. But this horse, unfortunately, although it did heal from its screwworm, did die from a colic episode about 9 months later. And then coming into 2025, in that same community in Costa Rica, they saw this 6-year-old gelding arrived at their field clinic, a grade 4 out of 5 lame with a wound on the distal metatarsus. And unfortunately, when they explored that wound, they thought that the larva had penetrated the tendon sheath on that horse, so had a really poor prognosis. But by this point, at least, most of the people in the communities were aware of this problem, and most of them had either seen it on their own animals, unfortunately, or those of their neighbors. This particular horse came in February to our clinic station in Honduras. A 3-year-old mare. You can see she's grade 5 out of 5 lame as she comes into the clinic. She had a 2-week-old laceration on the anterior of her tarsus. This video on the left, sorry for anybody that's still trying to eat dinner, but you can see that this wound's just severely infected, as well as just a tremendous number of larvae inside that wound. And we did anesthetize this horse. Oh, sorry about that. Again, it was important to spray these wounds with insecticide before you start working on them, and try to avoid getting any of these larvae to drop onto the ground, so that if they pupate and mature, you're just adding to the population at large. So this mare was placed under general anesthesia. We were worried because as we explored that wound, it really did appear to encroach on our tarsometatarsal joint. We did tap that joint. The joint fluid appeared grossly normal. I didn't put it on the slide here, but it did have an SAA of 0. So we continued with our debridement and flushing, and got just dozens of larvae out of this wound. Did do a regional perfusion with ceftiofur, gave this mare oral ivermectin, treated her topically with fipronil, which is an insecticide as well that we primarily have been using in these countries as a tick treatment, because ticks are pretty ubiquitous on most of our projects here. And then also placed her on trimethoprim sulfa phenylbutazone, along with dispensing some topical insecticide. We did bandage this wound post-operatively, but the way that these horses are kept in these communities, as you'll see on some subsequent slides, it's not going to be likely that you're going to have an owner that's going to be able to keep any of these wounds bandaged. This was sent to us by this horse's owner at 2 weeks. You can see that wound is starting to granulate in nicely. That clear area that's shown in the still photo in the center of the screen is probably still an active larval infestation there, where you get that sort of flatter non-granulation tissue appearance. But this mare did do well, and the owner was sent home with additional doses of ivermectin, as well as the topical insecticides. And you can see that she's still walking, she's a 4 out of 5 lame still, but she's starting to use that leg, and the wound's starting to granulate in nicely. And then this is at 4 weeks, and the wound's really closed nicely. She's got pretty good scar formation started. And as you can see in the video, she's using that leg nicely, and we expected her to have a full recovery at that point. Moving on to again this year in July, we were in a community in the center of Costa Rica, sort of eastern central north of San Jose. And this was a 4-month-old colt that was presented to us with a 2-week-old wound on his croup. That was just severely infested with larvae. And you can see in the photo on the left here, you can't really, it's not focused very well, sorry about that, on the larvae that are inside that wound, but there's just hundreds of larvae in this poor colt's wound. But what I also can see on that photo on the left is the eggs that Dr. Short was talking about. That's a cluster of eggs that are laid on the edge of the wound by an adult fly, in addition to the numerous larvae that are already present inside this wound. The slide or the photo on the right is with the topical insecticide spray put on that before we started trying to clean that up. So again, topical insecticides, oral ivermectin. This foal was also sent home with repeat doses of ivermectin to give at 3 and 6 weeks additionally. And we were able to follow up with the owner of this colt by phone. And at 3 weeks, the owner reported that the wound had granulated in nicely and looked like it was closing and on its way to a good full healing. Unfortunately, on the same day that we saw that colt, we also saw this 3-month-old filly with an eyelid laceration and a penetrating wound of her cornea. So we elected to enucleate that eye, which the surgery went well. But unfortunately, despite the same medications given to this filly, she did succumb to a myiasis, as reported by the owner, within about 2 weeks after the surgery. So don't really know whether that was a failure on the owner's part of keeping that clean or a failure of the medications to be able to prevent it. Again, on a project in Guatemala, this one I was also not able to attend, but got these photos from the folks that did. This was a 6-year-old mare with a history of lying down excessively. So probably some sort of wound from that on her elbow initially that allowed access to the flies, and this was also full of larvae, and they treated it. I don't have any follow-up on that one, but it is quite disconcerting. When you're in these regions, it's difficult enough whether to, when you're performing elective procedures under these sorts of conditions, you're always going to be at higher risk for complications. But when you look down and see the adult flies landing on your patient as you're doing a castration, it makes you pretty nervous. And certainly trying to further owner education and try to make sure that these animals can have proper aftercare, because I think, as you could see from Dr. Short's slides on how long it took to push this parasite south of Panama in the past, that I think we're going to be dealing with this, at least in Central America, for quite some time. That is just a photo of that spray, that purple wound spray that contains some insecticide in it to try to treat the wounds with post-operatively or any of the wounds that we see. I did find this one study that I wanted to share with everybody that was out of Brazil from 2004 from vet parasitology in cattle with, again, using a pour-on fipronil product. That's the same product that's in some of the topical dog and cat flea and tick medications here in the States. But I don't think that there's currently being sold a horse preparation of that. But it did show very good results in this study, both as a preventive given at the time of castration, as well as a treatment on animals that were not treated or that did develop any infestation post-castration. And we do use this quite a bit on our projects in Central America. This was a poster that I saw on the wall of the veterinary school of the National University in San Jose. So our USDA efforts at helping to spread the word about this do seem to be working and well supported there. But I've had a project in Costa Rica for the last 9 years, and I had not noticed this sign in the parking lot of the veterinary hospital at the National Agricultural University there, which is one of the veterinary schools in San Jose. But I think that the fact that they were dedicating the building courtesy of Gusano Brenador, so I think some of the funding for the elimination of this parasite back in the 70s probably helped, and 80s probably helped to build this hospital. Coincidentally, they're actually in the process of building a new hospital now. Anyway, thank you very much to the AAEP for having me on this webinar, and I hope that's been helpful. Thanks to the Equitarian Initiative for giving me the opportunity to get to work with these amazing people in these amazing places, and a very special thank you to the owners of these equids in these areas that trust us with their care on our projects. With that, back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. That was amazing and interesting in a horrifying kind of way. I hope we don't see. I kind of want to see it and I don't want to see it all at the same time. We have a couple questions. So one of them was about ivermectin delivery and whether or not injectable ivermectin is effective against the larva. And I believe it is, and it is FDA approved in ruminants and cattle, but not horses. And I believe injectable ivermectin comes with a pretty high risk of an injection site reaction.
Yeah.
How are you delivering ivermectin in Costa Rica?
Yeah, and on our project, so we do use the cattle formulation on a lot of our projects from a cost standpoint and an availability standpoint. But it is we do not use it as an injection in horses. They get a pretty severe reaction to the injection typically, and I know there's a lot of history of abscesses and things like that with the injectable formulation in horses. But we do use it orally. Occasionally, we'll get some oral swelling, a little reaction seems to subside very rapidly, but we do use that product orally. I did find several papers on ivermectin use against the screwworm, New World Screwworm, but several of those papers, it seemed to indicate that the results were quite variable and certainly not 100% effective. on killing the larva. So I do wonder, I mean, we are relying on that to some degree, and we are certainly doing repeat doses because, again, I don't expect my castration wound necessarily to be fully healed, especially we end up castrating adult animals not infrequently on our projects. And so not just, foals or yearlings. So I do think that the repeat dosing may be helpful, but I am questioning, as I've read some of those papers that I was able to find on the use of ivermectin for New World Screwworm. Doramectin seemed to have a little bit further a little bit better result in cattle, but I couldn't find anything really much on the use of Doramectin in horses. So I don't have any information on that. I do know that one of my colleagues, Judy Backer, who's done a lot of work in Haiti, and there is screwworm problems in Haiti. She said like even Catron spray, that the flies and the larvae there just laugh at even the Catron sprays on horses there. So I don't know. I think that the populations are going to be somewhat different, and I think that certainly hoping that there's some new research that we're going to see on whether or not ivermectin and at what dosages or at what treatment intervals might be effective.
That's actually another question in the chat about intervals. What are you guys prescribing for a redose interval?
Yeah, I think for what I was doing was at 3-week intervals. Again, and that's somewhat of a guesstimate, hoping that I'm not. I think from a safety standpoint, I feel very good about that. And again, I wouldn't use it as a strict a prophylaxis on a normal animal, but that's going to be in an animal that we've done surgery on or that has an open wound that hasn't fully healed in that time. And so far, at least on the follow-up that I've been able to get, our castration have not suffered from any myiasis at this point.
Excellent. And then we had a question about fipronil. What is the form and method of application? That was a 1% pour-on, correct?
Yeah, it's a 1% pour-on, and I've seen varying dosages. That study indicated, I think it was a 10 mg per kg dosage. It ends up being we end up using about a 10 ml amount of that 1% on a typical 400 kilogram horse there, 400 to 500 kilogram horse. So although most of those horses are pretty small, but yeah, we do use it quite a bit. Again, we primarily we were using it for years now because we have such problems with ticks. But I don't believe that formulation is available here in the States. I don't think that we can see it in the same format here. And I know that there are some concerns. It's definitely got some toxicity issues. I know that runoff, contamination from runoff into streams is an issue. I know it's toxic to fish. So there's some pretty good environmental concerns on using it broadly. So I'm not sure what the USDA's position will be on it.
Okay, thank you. That's really good information. Just one more quick question we have a veterinarian working in Costa Rica now, and I know we have several attendees south of the border here tonight, so welcome. But in places where people might be waiting a couple days after they identify the screwworm, they know they call the veterinarian, but maybe have to wait a couple days to have someone come out. Is there any recommendation? Should they isolate the animal, try to keep it away from other animals, or just
right? How can they help deal with it? Yeah, again, I think at this point, I think it's a pretty ubiquitous problem there, and I don't know how much isolation is going to matter when you've got flies that are able to travel pretty far. And so, I think obviously trying, if they can, what somebody can do, if they do have any topical insecticides available to them, that's certainly what I would tell them to start with. I wouldn't hesitate to, try to clean wounds, try to use topical insecticides. Again, being careful because some of the products that are out there. Horses are more susceptible to some of the toxicities are a little lower than they are in cattle. And I have seen some problems with people using some of the cattle insecticides on horses. So you've got to be very careful with that. And horse tolerances are definitely lower than cattle on that.
Great. Thank you so much. Those cases were really helpful.
You're welcome. And I apologize for some of the photos to anybody that was offended by those. I thought about trying to throw some fluffy pictures in between, but decided that most of this audience could handle it. And glad that I wasn't seeing any vomit emojis across my screen while I was presenting.
We got to be ready. If it's going to come here in real life, then you just
absolutely.
Okay, next we have Dr. Cody Egnor, who's with the USDA APHIS Veterinary Services, and Dr. Egnor is going to talk to us about what's happening at the border, what the plan, the U.S. response is, and how veterinarians are going to handle cases should we see them.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Donata. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, it looks great. Well,
okay,
as great
good.
as a bunch of flies can look.
That's great. Yeah, we need new pictures. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm definitely honored to be asked by the AAEP to present here tonight. USDA is going through a massive effort to get information out to horse owners, to livestock industry in general, to just be more aware and to look out for this. So again, honored to be here. In my day job, I'm more with the USDA strategy and policy swine health team. So I do pigs in my day job, quite literally right now, day job. I work in the swine disease traceability realm, and that's my passion, but I've been detailed and work a lot with New World Screwworm right now on that team. Kind of do a lot of presentations right now, just trying to get that word out. But so grateful to be here. So I wanted to follow up on kind of Dr. Short's, Dr. Gray, Dr. Donata's PowerPoints. Hopefully I don't overlap too much with them, but we'll see what we can do here. So the first thing in Panama, there was a study that was done in 2024 looking at the cases, the case distribution, and kind of I really wanted to bring it up here too to kind of highlight what Dr. Donata said. So these were the top 10 conditions in Panama, I believe it's just Panama, leading to myiasis, or the New World Screwworm infestation. So by far it's the umbilical. Over 5,000 cases had umbilical infestation. Next were cuts, so any wounds, lacerations, that sort of things, terrifyingly, to vampire bats. Then stings, wire cuts, ear tagging, dehorning, dog bites, peeling, say from branding or sun burns, and then like Dr. Short said, tick bites. Wounds as small as a tick bite, but it's not just introduction of wounds. They can also, if given the opportunity, infest into any of the open orifices of the body, and so that can definitely be a problem. In fact, the last human case in the United States in the 60s was a person in Texas that was infested in the nasal sinuses. So it doesn't necessarily need a wound, depending on just how aggressive that fly is. All right, so going to talk again over just a little bit with Dr. Short. This is a QR code. I have QR codes throughout this, so if you have your phone, you get your camera app, you can take a picture of any of these QR codes. So hopefully they work and take you to the links here on the websites that we have. This is the current distribution, current outbreak. The heavy concentration of cases, I have a little bit better map right now, is down the Isthmus of Mexico. We have this scary one up here in Veracruz, state of Veracruz, in a calf, I believe it was. So that was back in July. Haven't seen anything since that time. But we are definitely holding our breath. So in June 18th, on June 18th, 2025, Secretary Rowlands announced a 5-pronged plan approach to combating New World Screwworm. This highlights the USDA's efforts and kind of highlights the slides going forward. The first is to stop the pests from spreading in Mexico. So partnering in Mexico as much as we can to help stop that spread down there. Second is to protect the U.S. border at all costs, maximize our readiness, take the fight to the screwworm, and innovate our way to continued success. So not resting on technologies that we've used in the past, but see what technology nowadays can be leveraged against this terrifying bug. To help with that, there were 4 listening sessions held from the end of June to the first part of July to gather feedback on technologies and tools and just what's out there, what's available, and where we need to go with directing this. So USDA highlights 3 key interventions for eradication, and apologize if you were on the webinars yesterday or today, they're the same slides. But these 3 key eradication efforts were built on the history of New World Screwworm in the past, but also leveraging the dynamics and the interesting new aspects of equine world and livestock world today. First is sterile insect technique, and I'm going to talk more about that, but we're working to expand New World Screwworm production and dispersal capacity, challenging the concept that SIT is the only solution. In the 50s and 60s, we leveraged that heavily. That was a new technology back then, new strategy in combating that. We leveraged it heavy, and we realized that it's more dynamic with how animals move today, and so we're looking at additional opportunities there. In addition to sterile insect technique that I'm going to talk more about, robust regulatory controls is very important. Movement of people and animals have to be considered, not just how far the fly can fly, but how people move and how people move animals, both legally and illegally. And so we're working with our partners to enhance quarantine practices and establish robust animal control and inspection checkpoints. In addition, field surveillance. Surveillance is the key to sterile insect technique. It really is. And we were hoping to do that, obviously being here with stakeholder engagement, but to be aware of animal care and husbandry and breeding practices that weren't as common back in the 50s, but may be a part of normal everyday equine practice today. Considering treatment of wounds and veterinary care and supplies, what do we have available? What can we leverage? Now, USDA doesn't talk much about treatments. That's not our lane. Food and Drug Administration is lead on that. We're working with them closely to keep them appraised of what this current situation is, but they've been great partners so far. We also want to strengthen field surveillance activities for New World Screwworm, especially in Mexico. That's really, really important part of this. Obviously, outreach and education and expand lab capacity. So Dr. Short had mentioned the Commission for the Eradication of Prevention of Screwworm, or COPEG. That's the long worded term. It's a USDA partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture in Panama, established in 1994. It employs about 500 people, and the facility, here's the picture of the facility on the bottom of your screen, that is where all of our screwworm sterile flies are produced at this time. They maintain 29 outposts throughout Panama and 6 movement control posts. And then we have increased dispersal centers. So the sterile fly production and dispersal is so interesting. Now we irradiate the adult flies, and we irradiate the flies, and they're released into environment to mate with a wild female. So Dr. Short mentioned the females only mate once in their life, and that's their Achilles heel. If we can have them mate with a sterile male fly, they don't produce viable eggs. They still may produce eggs, but they're not viable. We can produce around 100 million flies per week, and those dispersal flights are based on our surveillance activities. And they can continue to shift northerly as new detections occur. This is a current map, very current, updated on August 8th of our dispersal polygons. So a little bit on this, I'm going to try and show you here. Let me try and get a laser pointer for us. Okay, so the red dots are active reported cases in Mexico and well, not Central America right now, but mainly Mexico. The white stars are inactive cases or cases that have had previous detections. The green boxes here at the isthmus and up here in the state of Veracruz are all of our dispersal polygons. So the flights fly a very laid out, very structured flight polygon to disperse these sterile flies. And once they do that, they're able to have increased active surveillance within these areas to see if the fly dispersals are being effective. In the week of July 28th to August 3rd, we dispersed 102 million sterile insects over those two green areas. Now, USDA did announce, Secretary Rollins announced that we will provide $21 million to fund a facility to produce these flies in Mexico. So we're helping Mexico to be close to that, where that outbreak is occurring. USDA is building a sterile insect dispersal facility in southern Texas and considering development of a domestic fly production facility in the United States. A little bit on an update of the importation. So effective on July 9th, USDA suspended live cattle, horse, and bison imports through the southern border due to the continued northern spread of the new World Screwworm in Mexico. Seneca, or the USDA counterpart in Mexico, a little bit different from the Costa Rica one. I was like, that's interesting. Seneca reported that case in Veracruz on July 8th, and that was about 160 miles north of the former sterile dispersal grid where that was located. And so due to that northerly spread, the imports were all stopped at that time. Now we do recognize there's a lot of domestic animals that are imported as well. Dogs are still eligible for import from Mexico with a health certificate if they're inspected within 5 days. They must have been certified to be free or have been treated and quarantined then free of New World Screwworm. Currently, we're in we have different strategy books, and first we have the green book, if you've ever heard of that. Definitely different colored books, and this green book update to the green book was published on June of 2025. There's a QR code if you're interested in greater detail, a lot less pictures, unfortunately, but greater detail on what the USDA response strategy is. The previous version was from January of 2018. In addition to that, we're working on the playbook. So the green book is the overall strategy, what we're looking at, but the playbook is the nuts and bolts action. That's currently in development. We're focusing on farmed animals and wildlife and developing an operational plan for the implementation of New World Screwworm. We are also incorporating SAHO and state animal health official or SAHO input, as well as seeking input from industry. And that is so important for us throughout this outbreak response. So what do we need to know? So the biggest thing is, how do we prepare for this as veterinarians? What do you work with on your clients? So the very first thing, establishing those strong veterinary client-patient relationships, having that communication where you're on their speed dial. So your clients or your veterinarian, depending on the audience, you have that communication, the protocol. You can respond quickly and effectively to this. We also encourage implementation of lower risk husbandry practices. And that's hard to define for us. We don't want to tell AAEP or any of its members how to practice, but how can we decrease the risk of New World Screwworm, and what practices can be adjusted or changed? I know that's a big concern in my industry in the swine world. We also encourage reviewing of fly prevention and control practices, what's out there, and what in the facilities that you serve, what practices are available. In addition, Dr. Donata gave a great presentation about wound management, one of the best I've seen, and how what do we know and how to collect them. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. Not as pertinent in the horse world, but still we need to remember withdrawal times. We need to establish clear practices for ECVIs. That's going to be an integral part for response efforts, and also review biosecurity practices with your clients. A little bit on reporting. Definitely not the most interesting part of the job, but accredited veterinarians must maintain a knowledge of reportable and potential foreign animal diseases. The National Accredited Veterinary Accreditation Program page is down, the link is to the bottom right there. Accredited veterinarians must maintain a knowledge of these diseases. Now, even if you're a not accredited veterinarian, you should know the triggers for an unusual animal disease response. Hey, those flies look weird, or they're really aggressive, or hey, I have flies in living tissue, or sorry, larvae in living tissue, should be flags for all of us. Neglecting to report cases can cause taxpayers millions of dollars in response efforts, unnecessary animal suffering and death, and potential risk to human health. We can't forget that this fly can infect humans as well, and that can be a major issue, both politically and publicly. Wildlife can also play a major role in disease outbreaks and maintenance of this disease, and symptoms should be reported as well if we see that in wildlife. Failure to report can cause veterinarians to lose accreditation. Now, we want to talk about so boring rules. 9 CFR 161.4 talks about all diagnosed suspected cases of a communicable animal disease for which APHIS has control or eradication. Now, we have to report those, especially if they're not known to exist in the United States, which New World Screwworm falls under that definition at that time. As we can see here. So yeah, got the law there behind us. But who can report? That's the biggest thing. Is sometimes we worry about, does it have to be a veterinarian? Does veterinarian go out? In a case like this, early reporting and efficient reporting is so important. So veterinarians, private practitioners, regulatory, military labs, public health, they all can report. Meat inspectors at slaughter plants, livestock and poultry producers, diagnostic laboratories, county extension, pet owners, or anyone. If you suspect New World Screwworm, please report it. So who do we report to? Glad you asked. We have 2 QR codes, one for the USDA APHIS area veterinarian charts. That's usually a veterinarian that's assigned to your state. They practice there, but also a great list is the state animal health official, the state employee that's in charge of the state that you practice. 2 great contacts. We work side to side with the SAHOs in all the states, and so whichever one you choose. Some SAHOs prefer to be first, totally cool, depending on what their preference is. We do encourage AAEP to work with their state animal health officials to establish those lines of communication and establish what that SAHO prefers. Give a little bit longer, have the 7-second awkward pause here. Okay, collecting and submitting. So I'm going to very briefly talk about this versus the webinars that we held today and yesterday. One, we got to contact the state animal health official or ABIC and get a foreign animal disease number. We are handling these as foreign animal diseases. And so we really need to contact them. Now, it may take some time for a foreign animal disease diagnostician to be able to reach your practice or the facility that these horses are at. So that SAHO may ask you to collect these. So what do we do? First, each animal doing this surveillance gets their own vial. So we don't want to pool samples. That's not good. We want to keep these separate. With New World Screwworm, we not only have concerns about the screwworm itself, but you can have multiple types of infestations within a single wound. You can have blowflies, you have screwworms, you have secondary bacterial infections. And so we want to make sure that if we collect a sample or a vial from a single horse, in this case, that is one horse, one vial. because we don't want to overload that sample and miss something that should be identified as screwworm. We want to, when we see these, as Dr. Gray pointed out, you can have all stages of screwworm within a wound. You can have the egg packets around the outside. You have the adult female flies. You have the larvae, the 3 larval stages within the wound themselves. Please collect safely. Please collect all that you can. And the more identification that we have, the better. Now, you put those in dry, no alcohol, and then if you find larvae or eggs, you can also put the other samples in 70% ethanol, and that will kill the fly, but we do not want to put them in formalin. That inhibits the identification process. I'm not fully aware of what goes on in there, but 70% ethanol will kill these, but also preserve them for laboratory identification. Want to remember PPE, gloves and forceps, especially with the multiple sizes, and take good photos. Photos are really, really important in these outbreaks, and these are some that were taken. Outreach materials. Okay, just finishing up here, USDA has put a lot of effort in providing as much material as we can. Found at USDA.gov, New World Screwworm. The dinosaur QR code is here. It's really good, the information that we put out on the website. We're trying to update it as quickly as possible. It's not live data, but it's as fast as we can. We have things like outbreak info, maps, sterile insect sheets. We also have linked to an economic impact analysis, a little bit of history of that. Links to USDA labeled pesticides. So pesticides are EPA regulatory control, where drugs are FDA regulatory control. We have CDC fact sheets, sterile insect, even US dog entry requirements. As we keep growing, we do have, I really, really like the AAEP brochure that they did, but we also have other brochures in both English and Spanish available for download from the website that you can print off. They're really good color. They'll blow out your printers with ink, so sorry about that. But we really wanted to provide really good pictures for you, your clients, to get that information out as fast as we can. We also have, I like this one, it's a pest alert fact sheet. It's a little more detail-oriented for presentations if you have to present to a producer group or something like that. It's a little bit more detailed, also available on the website. If you don't get this QR code, don't worry, it's all there. A little bit about COPEG and the sterile insect technique. It's all there. We also have helpful reporting links. So if you didn't get those QR codes for the AVICs or state vets, also there. SOPs for dog and animal detections. In addition, if you're interested and are really bored, we have a New World Screwworm veterinary module. This module is up for, it does account towards your accreditation. Module number 41, I believe that is. And that'll go a little bit deeper from what we talked about tonight and in the webinars, and just get you credit for accreditation. Having veterinary fact sheets, emergency response, and historical documents. Like I said, ton of information there. So much information. All right, and I believe that is all I have just historically. So this, I want to show a picture of this bottle. We didn't explain this in the webinar, which I thought it was a mistake, but here we are. This is a jar of screwworms, and this was a jar that was a lab that collected all these screwworms. It was in Maryland in the 60s, and in 1980s, this jar was transported by car in the backseat of a car. I think it was a big Cadillac from Maryland to Ames, Iowa, and it didn't break. So this jar is from all the screwworms that were collected at that lab at that time, and is held in formalin, and is currently at the NVSL laboratory in Ames, Iowa. So it's pretty historical, pretty terrifying, and scary.
That is disgusting.
I know, right? And we just breezed through it in those veterinary webinars. I'm like, this is so terrifying and cool. But I I would have got to like Virginia and spilled it all over the back and
Ugh.
caused a new outbreak or something. So there's our email. If you need anything, I'm Cody Agnor, cody.agnor@usda.gov. And I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you shared did you share your email, Dr. Egnor, because everybody's going to want to let you know tomorrow morning when they've had nightmares about the jar of screwworms. We have some questions in the chat. Here's a good one. If we come across a case positive for screwworms, are the clients at any health risk? Yes, screwworms can get people too.
Yeah. We don't classify. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Gray, go ahead, sir.
No, you go first.
Yeah, so we don't classify it as zoonotic, even though humans are susceptible. Like I said, the last human case in the U.S. was a rancher. Unfortunately, umbilical infections in babies, it can happen. Mexico has reported cases, including in Central America. So yeah, it is something we need to really watch out for our horse clients, but also watch out for our owners as well.
Yeah, I did see one report on 30 human cases in Nicaragua last year.
There's a question about in areas where the screwworm is endemic, what is the mortality rate? And I did a quick lit search, and it looks like, and I found numbers varying from 20 to 80%, which is pretty variable. Seemed like the higher mortality was associated in younger populations. So that was from a paper of fawns in Texas, back in the 40s. Is that consistent with your guys' understanding as well?
Yeah, that and granted, there was in that Panamanian study in 2024, they 80% of cases were in cattle, right? But there's very specific populations that this can target. I know historically in Texas in the 50s and 60s, it almost wiped out the white-tailed deer population. It really affected that species, and we believe, kind of from what we learned in the 16 and 17 from the key deer, where you have rutting behavior, they get a skin laceration from a horn wound, and there it goes. And so there's certain populations. Now, we do know it's near 100% mortality in untreated species, because that it just so extensive. Dr. Gray can speak so much more to that, but in untreated, it's very concerning.
Okay. I have several questions about topical treatments, and I think the best thing is I put a slide together really quickly. I found the USDA's response packet, the previous one, not the one you guys are working on right now, but let me just share this really quickly. Can you guys see this one, the correct side of it? Let's see. Here we go.
Yes. Yeah.
This is a screenshot from the USDA response plan from 2018, but I would assume these compounds are still thought to be effective. So these are topicals that are topical insecticides thought to be effective, and they are EPA registered insecticides effective against screwworm. You can see they are primarily permethrins. There was a question specific to pyrethrins, which I believe are the natural form. I think permethrin is a synthetic pyrethrin, if I remember correctly. So I don't know the answer if a pyrethrin would be specifically effective, but I believe they're closely related compounds. But you can see here mostly permethrins, sprays, dusts, drenches. Okay. Any other comments about treatment or topicals?
Yeah, and definitely EPA is the best for that, but don't want to shirk responsibility. The thing about this list, and I want to remind all attendees that yes, this is a registered product against New World Screwworm. But Dr. Gray mentioned that variable efficacy, and this fly can be really aggressive. And so just because it's efficacious or the EPA says, hey, yeah, it's on the list, doesn't mean it's going to be 100% effective.
Okay. There was another question probably for you, Dr. Egnor, about the border closure with horses being closely inspected as part of their import process in quarantine, the rationale for closing the border completely to horses as opposed to handling them case by case, inspecting them and treating them, should a case be identified.
Yeah, definitely. And that part of Secretary Rowland's five-pronged strategy was to protect the border at all costs. And with the volume of horses that we would get across the border, we felt that closing the border at right now is the best, mainly because we're working real closely with Mexico in their strategic trapping and trying to understand where that is. Obviously, that carries in Veracruz was concerning. And so we're working with Mexico, definitely increase the communications and public outreach across the US-Mexico border. We're working really close with our wildlife counterparts, including a lot of work down on the southern border. But that was a part with that we felt we needed to close the border, and we're evaluating it day by day right now.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have. Any other last remarks from everybody? No. All right, with 6 minutes to spare, this has been great. Thank you so much for serving on this panel. I think I'm going to turn it over to Karen, our moderator.
I am going to have so many nightmares tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just going to do it. Blah.
And then I'm going to have some great content for a horror movie if I want to do that.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is important information. And Dr. Gray, especially, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share some of your real life experience. Again, but we are very grateful that some of you are out there dealing with that. So some of us can sit and be mostly ignorant about it and happier for it. So, attendees, thank you so much. And we appreciate your good questions. You will be getting an email tomorrow with a link for the on-demand recording. And I'll try to gather up all of those QR code links as well and put them in a document for you. But I think it's pretty easy to go to the APHIS page and find stuff from there. And of course, thank you very much to American Regent, our sponsor for this session, and to Dr. Howland Mansfield, the American Regent Animal Health representative who kicked us off today. So with that, I think we can do one more joint shudder and then send everyone away. And again, attendees, thank you so much. We're getting lots of thank yous in chat and lots of thumbs up and applause in the reaction for those of you who are going to be listening to this later. Those things don't show up on the on-demand recording, which always makes me sad. Someone says, thanks for all the great info and disgusting photos. So, yeah, it's not the prettiest.
No,
topic,
it's not a
but
pretty disease.
it's very important to understand. So again, thank you so very much for joining us this evening. And with that, I think I will do the very awkward just hanging up on everybody. Yeah, so one last chance to wave goodbye. And, oh, I know, the thing I always forget to say, if you have any questions, send them to me. I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Send those questions to me and I will pass them along to our panelists. And I usually kind of keep them on the hook for another week if you have questions. So otherwise, yeah, now, thank you so much, everybody. And try not to have bad dreams. And we'll see you next time. So bye.